Advisory. Some episodes of the 1836 podcast are not intended for all audiences due to details that might be considered disturbing. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
This episode of the 1836 podcast shares the story of the Arkansas River people. In the early 1900s, when the land was still wild and the promise of a new life beckoned, settlers trickled into the lower White River area of Arkansas. The river wound through the landscape like a lifeline, its waters teeming with fish and mussels, its currents carrying dreamers to new destinations. Most of these newcomers staked claims on solid ground, planting roots in towns that sprouted along the banks. But a few, drawn by the river's restless freedom, chose a different path. They built boats, simple flat-bottomed vessels cobbled together from scraps of wood and whatever else they could scavenge. These were the first river people, rugged folks who lived not beside the water but on it. They called their homes shantyboats, each a unique display of creativity, some slim and low, others stretching wide across the water's edge. The river gave them everything: fish to eat, mussels to trade, and a path to roam. On land, people whispered about them, calling them vagabonds or worse, river rats or transients who drifted beyond the reach of law or decency. But the river people paid no mind. They kept to themselves, fiercely guarding their floating world, and when trouble brewed, they settled it their own way, swift and unforgiving, an eye for an eye beneath the open sky. As decades rolled by, their numbers grew, swelling with each turn of fortune's wheel. By the 1890s, when a great economic collapse shook the nation, families from the upper Mississippi Valley joined their ranks. They piled into homemade shantyboats, drifting toward the promise of work along the lower rivers. Arkansas's White River welcomed them, its gentle bends and hidden backwaters offering shelter. Here the river people carved out a life apart, fishing and trapping, diving for mussel shells to sell to button makers, and gathering pecans beneath the autumn sun. The law rarely ventured to their watery domain, leaving them to rule themselves, a community bound by unwritten codes and shared struggle. Then came the 1930s and the Great Depression. The land faltered, and the rivers swelled with the displaced. Along the lower White River, near places like St. Charles, Des Arcs, and Benzoll Village, shantyboat towns bloomed. Clusters of floating homes tethered to the shore or nestled in quiet swamps. Up to 500 people called this stretch home. With boats stretching 10 feet wide and 40 or 50 feet long, flat-bottomed and sturdy against the current. Some were humble single-story shelters. Others, like a grand two-story craft in Camden, rose like a testament to their maker's dreams. Life on the water was both a gift and a curse. The men cast nets for fish, sold furs from mink and beaver trapped in winter, and pried mussels from the riverbed, for a trade soon to fade with the rise of plastic. Women and children pitched in, gathering nuts or tending the boats, their days unmarked by clocks or the clamor of towns. Yet hardship shadowed them. The shantyboats leaked and swayed in floods, their cramped quarters stinking of river mud and neglect. On land, voices like that of Arkansas Health Officer C.W. Garrison decried them as a menace, with their rough ways a stain on orderly society. Tales of violence rippled outward, too. A feud in 1929 saw Henry Applegate gunned down near Benzoll Village, his death tied to an older grudge, a whisper of the river's wild heart. The river people answered to no one but themselves. When the law failed, they took justice into their hands. In 1931, a young woman named Helen Spence, raised on a White River houseboat, stepped into a DeWitt courtroom and shot the man who'd killed her father. They called her the Swamp Angel, her act a blaze of river justice that echoed their creed. Helen's story will be featured on the next episode. 4 years later, a United States deputy marshal named Purvis, tasked with evicting shantyboat dwellers, enlisted a river tough to muscle through the job, proof that even the law bowed to their ways when it dared to trespass. But the river's embrace couldn't hold forever. In 1935, the White River National Wildlife Refuge was born, its rules barring new moorings and chasing the shantyboats away. The world shifted beneath them. Mussel shells lost their worth, fish markets dwindled, and the land itself changed. Locks and dams tamed the rivers, highways carved through the wild, and boat traffic churned the once quiet waters of Three Rivers country, where the White, Arkansas, and Mississippi met. By the late 20th century, stricter laws in the 1990s and the March of Progress had swept the river people from their floating homes, leaving only a scattering of weekend shantyboats as faint echoes. Their story faded into memory, kept alive in tales passed down. The river people lived as rebels on the water, defiant and free, until the tide of time carried their world away.